Hello and welcome to another episode of Artists on Artists. It's the Glasstire podcast where we interview artists and talk about studio practice, what's happening in the world. Today we're speaking with Erica Felicella, a Dallas-based interdisciplinary artist whose work is based in durational performance, and she wears multiple hats, including the one that's currently on her head. And she's also the executive producer at Aurora Dallas. And we're just gonna dive right in. Erica, welcome to Artists on Artists, and thank you for taking the time to share your practice with our audience.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
And we were discussing a moment ago how we both, as with most Texans, went through the crazy ice storm and the power loss and some loss of water. How did you fare? How are you doing?
We did pretty good. Just water, old pier and beam, 100 years old. Not prepared for this in the state of Texas. I always wished for snow because I'm a Yankee, but every winter I want that. I'm never going to ask for that again. So...
That's right. You're from the East Coast, correct?
Yeah, I'm from New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, okay. How long ago did you move to Texas?
So long ago, I should probably call myself a Texan, but I've been in Dallas for over 20 years now, and I lived in San Antonio before that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What brought you to Dallas?
It was actually my sister. We didn't really know each other, and so I moved up here, kind of still young and dumb, and started a life over here up in Dallas, Texas.
Were you interested in art in any way?
That's like a long, deep question for me. But, I call that kind of a reset period for my life. I started photography and performing poetry at a young age, but then sports and love for psychology and biology kind of took me in a different direction. And then I completely had a major meltdown and disappeared for like 3 years, and then reemerged here in Dallas and found art again after I'd been here a couple of years. So
I touched on it a little bit, but you are on planning committees, art media board membership, steering committees. You work with the Emergency Artist Support League. Is there another Erica like doing all those things while you're talking to me right now? It seems like a lot.
I never know. I have a committee problem and a community problem is what I call it. No is not a word that I'm very good at, especially when it comes to advocacy for artists and the arts. I think 4 boards right now, or 3, I can't remember. I have to go to my CV to check. But I'm doing some board work on the side as well as working with Aurora. So
it is a good problem for Dallas to have, that you're so engaged and involved with everything that's happening there. I want to talk a little bit about your work. 2 in particular, The Visible Shell and Unburden. And like some of your other works, it involves communication in some form, whether you're the communicator or whether you're eliciting a response from your audience.
Well, Visible Shell, actually, I don't show record of it anymore, but I was a conceptual photographer first. And, I went through a period where all my gear kind of disappeared, not of my own doing. So Visible Shell was the next thing I thought of. And it's rooted in, American society's inability to sit still. And also the fact that, the showing of emotion is like a huge sign of weakness is what people see. So I wanted to put myself, again, rooted in psychology, big part of my practice, is I wanted to put myself in a place where people were going to have to face that. See a person put into a situation that was alarming in a way, but also freeing for people. It's also very, there was a lot of ritual in it. Like I said, I wrote the same sentence, only that sentence, for 2 days. And I had panic attacks in there. I had crying fits in there. It's like I tried to, if I fell asleep, I had other volunteers, performers, wake me up. They had to hit the shell really hard, which was startling. But I really just wanted to create a space that was in the public for art to be seen, not necessarily where you would typically see it. The weirdest stuff happened. It's a beer store across the street, like was live streaming it and sending people over with 6-packs to like hang out around it. And it built this community, in a weird way. And I put as much out there as I can, but you never know how people are going to take it in. I received a lot of feedback from people that I've never even met. I received cards in the mail. I received emails, all kinds of stuff about just thanks for showing a side of their own experience that they're not willing to open up about. I think that's kind of where that came from. It's also kind of rooted in some personal stuff that happened to me in the past, which that thread is in everything that I do. We're part of our work. It's just kind of inevitable. So that's where Visible Shell led me to. As a lot of people have pointed out, I like to contain myself for some reason. And, it led me to Unburden. And I was just thinking about, people hide so much inside. And there's stuff that they wish that they could just say, but it doesn't feel safe, or it feels wrong, or they don't want it out there in the world, but they need it out there in the world. So I created a containment upon a containment upon a containment. I made myself a prisoner. I was shackled just like a prisoner would be. I was put into what's supposed to be a prison visitation booth. And people were allowed to come one at a time and tell me anything they wanted. And I will never repeat it. And I've done it a couple of times. And people have been amazing. Even people I know, which is, that one caught me off guard. It's, it's like, I have to see these people again. And yet they're willing to share something with me and see me again and know that I know this thing about them, but that I will never bring it up.
In both those circumstances, it feels like, for lack of a better comparison, like a priest or something, hearing confessions.
Yeah.
And then in the Visible Shell, you were expressing your own inner thoughts. I find that such a tight balance of both being the vessel for embracing our secrets and then revealing your secrets in your own way.
Yeah, I would say that's also just a large part of what I try to do, is to expose myself in hopes that it lets other people know that it's okay, if that's part of them, and then also to receive. I was also born and raised Catholic. I don't realize how much that actually weaves its way into my work, but it gets pointed out a lot. They're like, I'm like, I did that again, didn't I? So it's never intentional, but it happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think like my connection to ritual is stems from Catholicism. It's like everything had a purpose, everything was done a certain way, and it's brings me back to just like being very intentional about every little aspect, even if somebody doesn't catch like why that pencil is in that place. It has a meaning for me. It's just little rituals that I put within everything that I do.
I have some questions written down here. I just wanted to remind myself, looking through your work, some of the things that really I felt connected to. And I should say that the more artists I talk to, the more I just see glimpses of connection between my own work and their work. For instance, at the DMA, I did a telephone booth and a Morse code machine where you could send your messages and your communications into the ether. So people were like going in and saying things. And then Visible Self I feel a connection to it in an installation I did called The Bubble Boy, where I was, for completely different reasons, isolating myself in a bubble. It warms my heart that we have maybe some kind of universal artist language that we all sort of sometimes tap into and move away from.
No, I've been talking about that actually quite a bit with some other artists, just because we're sharing thoughts right now, whether we like it or not, because we're all living this experience that is out of our control. So I've been very interested about how it's affecting others' practices, and like what is their dialogue at the moment. And regardless of the output, you can find those threads, which that's what we do, right? We have the conversation of the times in as it reflects upon us. So
Yeah. But in that way, I find that you're like either anticipating the future in your work or tapping into this like relevance that seems to transcend the moment in which you create your work. For instance, behind the closed door, it anticipates this idea of isolation where you're in a space with very little contact with the outside world, perhaps of your choosing, but also just reflecting on the idea of isolation. There's another piece that you did, traveling together, which is this notion of our shared desires and our shared experiences that we want to connect and express. Both of those things are things that we're dealing with right now, our isolation and our need to connect in a way that humans do, but we are denied.
yeah, that set was my home. I used my own home since it was a studio tour. And when you're a performance artist, I've always been challenged. I'm like, what do you do for a studio tour? You know, if I do think about it now, people that suffer from certain mental illnesses have been living this life every day for however long. And now there is this connective feeling that that person would have never had with that other person. But because of the pandemic, they're getting bits and pieces of what it's like to suffer in certain ways that there was never a way to connect with in the past. I'm sad that people are experiencing this mental anguish, but it also plays against some stigmas that are, something that are very important to me, to try to beat the walls on this all the time. So I hope that, through work that I do, and also just through the human experience that we're living through, that people might start to open their eyes a little bit more about certain mental situations that people live through right now.
Yeah, I can see it in the just how personal the work becomes and how willing you are to quote unquote go there. Uh, um, like, who are some of your influences as a performance artist?
It's interesting because, I didn't know anything about performance art. I'm self-taught, and I actually came up, like I said, through the ranks of photography. So I just got super lucky because Goef Kern, who is somebody who I love his work, I love his process, and I somehow accidentally became his first assistant
Really?
for a very long time. So we developed a very unique relationship, and I just sat back and watched, and watched him, and it taught me so much, like his wife, and just how it works, what it takes, and how to be precise and to be meticulous and have it be okay. It's like that ultimate perfectionist that I try to not be, but I ultimately am. So
Yeah.
I kind of learned performance actually through commercial photography. And I learned it from a production side of things. So that's where I picked up my inspirations. Started like basically from storyboards to developing this, the concept and executing it, and all the steps in between, and how to get the emotion out. And the difference there was, and all the things that I used to do, is that I had to do it in one frame.
Hmm.
And so I just wanted to find a way to extend that frame. Um, and so that's how I went in that direction. I've been studying performance artists since. I've realized that I've been pretty isolated in the way that my art in general. All of my inspiration is drawn from like Gregory Crewdson, who's one of my favorite photographers. And if I had $1 million, like I would work the same way he does and would probably go back to photography.
Yeah.
But Andy Goldsworthy, it's just weird, Smithson,
Hmm.
earthworks, all that kind of stuff have actually played a part into what I do. And then, my performance is also based on like 30 years of therapy. It's like, it's a, and I get educated by others right now. It's like people send me emails and they'll be like, go look at this piece. I'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, Marina's the obvious one. That's the
Right.
first person that, everybody told me to go learn about. And I've been learning a lot about her childhood and how it's played into what she ended up developing, in her 20s and on. So, yeah, it's a process. It's learning, but my roots are from photographers and vaudeville. Even I pull from, which may make no connection between the work that I make now.
Actually, I can see that
Yeah.
a little bit. And one of your pieces, which I think, if I can think of a piece or point to a piece that bridges Erica, the artist, and Erica, the community involved and community obsessed individual, it would be that piece, Shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you maybe describe it as a metaphor for community, but it's also like a physical manifestation of how community works. But it also has, because it was done in sort of a street festival,
Yeah.
art festival, it had a, carnival vaudevillian aspect to it.
I heard someone actually scream out during that piece, when is she going to do a magic act? And I was trying not to start cracking up. It was just like, I was like, this is perfect. So it was the Deep Ellum Arts Festival. So
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to bring something that was unexpected. That and my obsession with bodysuits. I don't know where that's coming from lately, but like that was super bright yellow. But it's just, that's what the piece needed to be, the connection of that color to community and what it means. That piece was probably one of the most vulnerable pieces I've done, because I was at the mercy for safety by others. And some people did let go of the rope, and I almost fell numerous times. And I thought afterwards, I was like, boy, I should have worn a helmet. And I was like,
That would have been straight into the Evel Knievel world. A helmet
like the
with a
whole
big
rounded
star.
one. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so I did that whole piece for the most part with my eyes closed. So I had no
Wow.
idea what was going to happen. But yeah, it's a, community has to work together. Otherwise it falls.
Yeah, and you're physically putting yourself in a lot of the work that you do by the nature of the kinds of performance that happens. How do you sum up your life in 40 hours on a typewriter?
I haven't read it yet.
Really?
But yeah, it's like
Okay, let me
I
let
want
me
to
set this up for our audience. If I'm understanding it correctly, for 40 hours, you summed up your life 1 year each hour on a typewriter. And then maybe the last few hours, people were allowed to observe you complete the task.
So I'd hit 40, and I had to do something about it. I wanted to try to journal and collect my story.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a little background data because, I don't remember 1 or 2 or 3. So I did talk to my mom a little bit about a few things. And then I did 2 typewriters, one for 20 years, the other one for 20 years. And it's continuous paper because I wanted to show the thread that we are and what creates us. So it just pooled on the ground over time. I haven't read it yet because I don't know. I'm not ready yet. I was going to have somebody transcribe it for me so that I'm going to have that need to happen eventually. But I missed all kinds of stuff. It's like, oh, that was huge. How did I not put that in there? But the sleep deprivation on that piece really got to me. It's not the longest piece I've done, but I'm working on some longer ones. But yeah, the 40 hours was I just needed to get to a place where I could begin the next part of my life. So that was one of the main reasons to do it, was to put the significant milestone behind me so I could move forward. And the little thing that I don't put in the website is that the very last thing I typed, this was also a very long proposal to my wife. So the very last paragraph was her proposal. And what she didn't know is that the ring was on, in the staging area the whole time. She actually put it there. I just had a special box made for it, so it didn't look like a ring box. And everybody came in, and a lot of strangers, and they ended up witnessing a proposal that had typos. And I also learned, like, there's no Command Z on a typewriter. So
You
I was
just
like, and I'm dyslexic, so it was just like, I'm like, I don't even know what that word means. Oh, we'll just keep going. It was very cathartic in a lot of ways. And it was also the first time. I've always wanted to do something in a storefront setting,
hmm
and just to have something happening that they could just walk past and it's not even noticed. Deep Ellum was an interesting place to do it because it's very busy at night. So I had some very interesting, incredibly intoxicated visitors at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I had street cleaners come in at 4:30. The water was seeping in under the window and like
Oh
at the
man.
paper. I was like, "Ah." But no, at the end it was. I'm really glad I did it. So it was awesome
Yeah.
to let it go.
So yeah, talking about that, just that little thing, like the water seeping through. How do you respond to life happening around durational experiences? Like,
Um,
were you gonna jump up and move the paper or just let it happen?
I watched it kind of pooling towards, and the panic was setting in, and it was like, what am I going to do? I said, let's wait to see if it's going to get close enough to ruin my life, essentially, like literally my life. Um, and it didn't get there. So it was good. But I mean, when it comes to, live durational work, and humans, like, you can prepare for everything on your side, but you can't prepare for life on the outside. I've done everything from having a strict therapy sessions, dietitians, like, for Visible Shell, I worked with a full medical team to develop a process. And then I'm kind of in the hands of the world at that point. And you just have to power through. Visible Shell, like I learned after 5 hours, a hard plastic chair actually can become comfortable. But those first 5 hours, like, our bodies adapt, in
Yeah,
ways that we didn't know were possible. But you don't know unless you put yourself in these extreme situations. And people have done all kinds of weird things to me. It's like I've
what's
had
the weirdest thing? What comes to mind?
people always want to tell me I'm okay and that it's going to be all right. That one always catches me off guard. Uh, People dropping the rope on shift. I didn't even
Mm,
think about that at all. It's like I have such a warm idea of community
yeah,
that I forget there's a backside to it as well. And I didn't even consider that as an option. So that one's probably the biggest. Luckily, some people came running in from the side and grabbed the rope and pulled me back up. Behind the closed door, they weren't really supposed to talk to me. Somebody like sat on the sofa with me and leaned on me for a while and just talked to me. It's just kind of the stuff that goes with performance. It's
yeah,
like I like to put it in a place where people feel like they can step in, but that means you have no idea what's going to happen.
right. One final piece that I want to talk with you about, and I encourage our audience to visit your website because it was such a great journey to just sort of experience your work that you've documented and just kind of try and understand how you approach things. One of the works was, I don't remember what it's titled, but it's the brick building to your inner child.
Inner Sanctum, that was
Inner
it.
Sanctum. Okay, yes. Where did that work come from?
Yeah, it's kind of a love story to myself. It's like so many of us out there, just like, if we could go back to our awkward selves. Like, I was an incredibly, like, shy and scared kid and weird. It's like I didn't talk to anybody unless I was on like a stage or on a field. And if I was performing, I could sing, I could dance, I could do all this stuff, and then I get off the stage again and just be like this little wallflower.
Yeah,
And it's like I wanted people to be able to speak to their younger selves. And it's interesting because we still to me, it was like the reason why there's multiple reasons why I use the cinder blocks, but one of the biggest ones is we lock our inner child, once we get older. Like we just kind of like put it down in our inner self and forget that, there's a pretty cool, awesome person down there, and maybe they went through something and you want to talk to them about it. And the piece, I kind of wanted people to go back there and think, who was I as a child? And what did I worry about? And just kind of let that go. And,
It seemed like a really poignant piece. As with all the works on your CV that I've observed, I'll repeat it, that it's been a really great journey through your process and through your work. And I encourage our audience to check out your website and experience some of these works. Having said that, what do you have coming up? You sort of teased an even longer durational experience.
Well, first, I want to say thank you for the very kind words about my practice. Sometimes I ask myself why I keep doing this. Like, what's the point? Is my voice even, what am I leaving behind in the world? And so thank you. That reminds that little insecurity, artist insecurity. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll keep going. I have work designed for the next 20 years, at least. It's just the problem that I run into is that my ideas are really expensive. And so it's the little ones that kind of pop up that really excite me. And I may never get to the big ones, but I'm working on one that's a week long and another one that the week long, I think it's going to be a week. It could be a little under or it could be over because it's based on a physical activity and it has a start and an end. And it just depends on how worn out I get in the process. So one of the pieces I'm working on for this year, as soon as I have clearance from an orthopedic doctor, I'll start physical training. I think it'll take me about 10 months. The piece itself will only be about 3 hours, but it's a story and a dialogue on, carrying baggage in life and how we can with others either add to it or subtract it, and how no one walks alone. As isolated as you think you may be, like you're here with others and it's a shared experience. Even though I'm constantly isolating myself, there's people with me always. So that one will be a very physically strenuous work. But if I can ever get to my dream piece here in Dallas, it's a month long. So I'll enter and then completely detached from discussion or interaction with another human for 30 days. It's just like $500,000. It'll be no
biggie.
Problem, no big deal. Yeah.
I'm more intrigued by your ambition and scale of time and endurance than cost. But whenever it happens, we hope to be there. And
I'll let you know. You know. If I get to that, that month-long piece, part of the design is actually to, without giving too much away, but is to actually create a campground in an urban setting that the city gives people permission to actually bring their families and physically camp for however long they want in their tents and whatnot for that month-long period. So it's a way to bring the community again engaged, but separated. So we'll see. I play the lottery Wednesday and Saturday. So.
Well, when you hit, remember the little people. It's been such a pleasure talking with you and listening to you talk about your work and sharing your work. And we look forward to your next exhibition and your next big project.
I appreciate being here, Christopher. I hope you enjoy the warmth. Like I said earlier, I'm in sandals today and I'll take it. So
I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.